Welcome to Life, Lafter Divorce, episode 7. I am your host, Leanne Linsky.
And I'm the boyfriend.
Yes, you are, still. I know every week we...
You're going to hear a new voice here soon, and it'll be the new boyfriend.
Boyfriend number 1. So...
I'm sure I'm not number 1.
You're number 1 in my book.
Oh, yeah, whatever.
You're 1 on my list most days.
So, what are we talking about today?
Today I was thinking we could talk about how we are affected by indirect relationships around us and how they shape our perspective of divorce.
So, like, are the people at Starbucks? Like, what are you talking about here?
Well, if you know the people at Starbucks and what the relationship situation is like, possibly. But I'm thinking, how when, for instance, when you're growing up, all your friends start getting married and you're like, maybe I should change my mindset. Maybe that's what I should be doing, getting serious, settling down. And then, your friends are all married, you're married, and then you're like, maybe I should have a baby. Everybody's doing, like, it's kind of like, where's your mind at? What are you surrounded by? And how are you influenced by people around you?
I think that's the examples you just provided are interesting because I think that's how we grow up.
Yeah.
But I think it's more interesting to see how we are affected by persons that are going through difficult times in their relationship.
Well, that's the flip side of it. And I'm wondering, because our topic is always, of course, divorce, how about if you're influenced maybe, of course, by your parents? That's first and foremost in most people's book, probably. But siblings, other friends, how are those relationships? Because you're not in them directly, but you're hugely impacted by them in many cases.
Yeah, because what happens when your best friend has problems with their relationship? Who do they come talk to?
You.
Yeah, so
exactly.
you have to, or you are a part of their lives, and you go through these experiences with them. It may not be what you're going through, but you take something from it. At least I would hope so.
I would think so. And what I'm wondering is, how does that shape us as we go into our own relationships? And how does that affect us in the long term of how we view how to work things out?
Well, there's probably 2 ways here. There's the people that it doesn't affect at all.
Right.
Like, and God bless those people.
I don't know those people, but okay, robots.
But you would have to, if you're human, if you have feelings, you're going to learn something. Hopefully you learn something from these experiences of your friends or family.
Yeah. And I think in some cases, we're probably more greatly affected than we realize, because something has to shape us as people. Something has to put our moral book by which we, what's the word I'm talking about?
Do you think it affects you morally, or does it just help shape your decisions on how you react or interact in the situation?
It could be both, depending. Like if you're raised by people who do a lot of things, even though they're bad or maybe morally incorrect, you think that's the way things are, and that's your norm. So I think it could. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I think it could. I do think it could shape our values, our morals, everything and how we view the world. And what if you meet someone who doesn't have those same views? When those 2 worlds collide, how do you work through that?
I don't know. So let me ask you specifically then. So you've been through 2 divorces.
Right.
Your parents weren't divorced. Have any of your other friends been through divorce, and has that affected you? How about any of your family? Do you have family members that have been through divorce?
I do, but they didn't go through a divorce till after I was divorced. So I probably helped, had a more of an effect on them than vice versa. I think I would have thought that my parents' relationship would have influenced me more on the positive side, but for whatever reason, I wasn't a good student in that sense.
Yeah, but if you don't know anything that's bad or how to deal with bad situations because your parents have a great relationship,
right,
then you are affected by it.
Right, because then I wasn't fully prepared to deal with what I was dealing with. And that's a very good point. You only know what you know.
Yeah. So, Leanne, who do we have this week?
Well, I'm so glad you asked, boyfriend, because our guest this week actually was highly influenced by indirect relationships or direct relationships around him in his past. So he has a really great story to share with us. And this guest is a comedian out of New York. He is the host of the Slant Podcast, which you can find on iTunes. And I'll be sure to include all of his contact information in the show notes. So be sure to check that out. And I'd like to introduce you to Sal Colandonato. So without further ado. Hello, Sal.
Hello, Leanne. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on. I am so excited to have you here today because you have never been married or divorced, right?
Right. I'll be married in May.
Yes, that's right. So congratulations on your engagement.
Thank you.
May is not that far away.
No, we've been engaged 2 years and it's flying up on us.
2 years for an engagement?
Yeah. I mean, we were together going on 11 years in May. And we got engaged 2 years ago and we were paying for the wedding ourselves. So we had to do all the saving and planning ourselves. So we decided to give ourselves some nice cushion room, make sure it all went off without a hitch.
Okay, so I have so many questions going through my mind now because you've been with this girl for 11 years. So let's start at the beginning. Like, where were you born?
I was born in a hospital in Brooklyn, New York, but I've lived my whole life in Staten Island, New York.
Oh, okay. All right, but you're not in Staten Island now, are you?
Yes, I am.
Really? Okay, I didn't realize that. So you take a lot of ferry rides?
I did until we purchased a car about a little over a year ago. And since then, that's how I get around. But, the ferry's very convenient. The transit system in New York's really convenient. So going in and out of Manhattan or any of the boroughs, it's very easy compared to other places. So,
yeah, you are getting married in May, and you guys have been together for 11 years. So where did you meet?
We met. I was a photo tech at CVS, and she got hired as a photo tech at CVS. And it's really strange because I was in a relationship when I was 19 with the 21-year-old girl who I was like head over heels with because she was like older or whatever. And we broke up, and I wasn't in a relationship for like 2 years, and I didn't have any prospects. And I heard they were hiring a new girl, and I had been working at CVS for some time. So in my head, I was like, oh, this new girl, we're going to hit it off. I don't know how. I was young. I was like 20. And she got hired there. And her first week, I started pursuing her. And I was fired, I think, by the next week. It was supposed to be our first day working together because I was drinking on the job at the time.
How did that happen? You were young, right?
Well, yeah, I'm a recovering alcoholic. I don't drink anymore. I did many stupid things like that. But what happened was, I don't know, one day I decided I'm going to drink beer while I'm working. So I'm in my lab coat helping people with their photos. But I have a beer can covered in cardboard wrapping. So it's very obvious what I'm doing. I'm just helping customers like that. And the manager at the time, she kind of had it out for me. Not that I didn't give her a reason to have it out for me, but she was becoming an FBI agent. So I guess she was very investigatory because she dove into the dumpster and pulled out the evidence, whatever. But yeah, it was.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. And so and you guys had just met like a week before. So she knew all about this and everything, right?
Yeah. We met on the job. I just went to the back and I started a conversation. I don't know. Before I ever did comedy, I just was able to write, I guess. I was an English major, so we started talking about literature, and she was into books. So that was my big pickup there. And yeah, then eventually one night she called me to hang out when we were in the neighborhood. And it was it wasn't very serious at first. Like she brought me like a gift one day out of nowhere, and then I would go in and say hi and that kind of stuff,
Yeah, so you really kind of pursued her and swept her off her feet. Nice.
I mean, it was a little rough at first because she had just moved from Brooklyn to Staten Island only a few months before, and she had a long-term boyfriend who she had just broken up with but was still in contact with. So she didn't want to get in serious with me. So it was very touch and go for a while because she would let me in a little and then push me back out. And then we didn't talk for like a year. And in that time, me being the immature brat I would go into CVS. And I remember one time when we were kids, the little paper balls, and you threw them and there would be just enough gunpowder for them to pop.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
little
Yeah. Yeah.
snaps.
Yeah. Okay.
I was
Snaps. Yep.
throwing those at her from behind the counter and being like just a dick. And one other time I called up and complained to CVS because I knew if you put in a complaint, then they would tell the manager and the manager would address it with them. But I knew she wouldn't get in any trouble because the way when they asked what my name was, I told them Captain Jack Sparrow. So when they came to her with the complaint, they were like, you got a complaint from a Captain Jack Sparrow. So she kind of knew it was me, and the manager obviously didn't take it seriously at that point. So little stupid stuff like that. We didn't talk for a while, and we both ended up at a wedding together. And Eric Clapton's You Look Wonderful Tonight came on. So I asked her to dance, and we were together since.
Okay. So it's been 11 years.
And then 11 years, yeah. I spent 3 of those in the Army, though, away from her. And when I came back, we got together again officially, and that was in 2012, and we're together since. So.
Well, that's fantastic. 11 years is a long time. That's like longer than both my marriages put together.
Wow.
So,
especially it happened in our our whole 20s. So we pretty much grew up together. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I came into being an adult knowing her, and she's pulled me through a lot of my stupidity through the years. I got to credit her to that, my sobriety and all that. She was there through all the dark ages and didn't give up on me. So.
Well, that's really awesome. That's because that's a lot of work for the both of you. So congratulations on that. And it's interesting because, you guys started dating so young, so I could see when you were both dating that why you hadn't been married yet. But now you've been together 11 years, and obviously a lot was going on, and you were in and out of the Army. But I'm wondering, like, how was your thought process through this? Did you know that you were going to get married, or were you what were your feelings of marriage before?
It's a really good question. So when I was at that age, when I met her, the way I was in relationships it wasn't normal. I don't know if it's because of what I went through growing up when my parents divorced. But I had this idea, like you meet the person and then you love them and you make it when you get married and happily ever after. Because I remember in high school, like I wouldn't know a girl at all, and if we were seeing each other, and then if it didn't, I'd be like writing letters like, "You're the love of my life," like really unrealistic stuff. Like my high school sweetheart, I remember saying, "Oh, I want to propose to you at graduation." Like I had any concept of actually being married, so when I met her, I was like head over heels, and then we were together. We tried moving in together after like 2 years. I was heavily addicted to opiates then, like the Percocet pills more specifically, and it didn't work because she wasn't about that. She grew up in a household where they were addicted to drugs, and somehow she was like a miracle that she didn't follow in any of those footsteps. So she was always against it. So that's where all the fights come, her resisting and the addict and me being like, "Ooh." So we broke up, and I thought it was, that we weren't going to work. And then we talked again, rekindled when I was leaving for the Army, and then I left for the Army. And the long distance thing is hell. Like, I don't know how we made it through it. We always talked about if we had to do it again, we probably wouldn't. But I came out of it like, I don't know, I really wasn't thinking of marriage. My head wasn't in the place yet. Like, I didn't really get fully clean and sober until 2012 was the start of it. And then like that's when we started thinking more seriously, but we were living together. And she brought it up a lot. We were together so long, and me just not knowing because I don't know. When you're having fights in a relationship, like we would have that a lot, and it would always be like, well, then you're not the one for me. I'm gonna leave, but we'd stay. And then I think 2014, I went for it and I proposed. And I honestly, if I had to tell you the truth, I wasn't completely sure. And this is my fault until like the last year, because like I said, I came from a divorced household. And when I learned at a young age that divorce was like a thing, I started to look at relationships differently. Like it's not what TV says. It's not a storybook. Marriage, everybody just thinks it's the next step and they jump into it. Also being in the Army, people were getting to their base. They're getting to their base. They're going out to strip clubs. They're meeting a stripper, knowing them for maybe a week, marrying these strippers. And then in a month, they're divorced, or when they go deploy in a few months, and I was like, I started to see how people act in marriage, and that kind of skewed me towards it. And I started to see it as a trap, as being very scared. Becoming a comedian, I was very scared because I became a comedian at 28, and I'm, changing what I want to do in my life, thinking that she was going to hold me back, not support it. If she had any fears of money, where are we going to get money? Because I'm still currently a carpenter. And it was like, I'm going to focus on comedy, and I always took anything as you know, as a hindrance, as like an anchor of the relationship. You know, what I've come to learn over the last year, though, is she fully supports my comedy. She just likes to keep me in check, make sure I do, because eventually I find out months later the things we'd argue about, she was completely right about, like anything with the drugs or the drinking. Like I find myself coming back in time and going, you were right, and thank God you were here, or else I would have still, you know. And what I've come to learn is like, a lot of people, like I said, think marriage is, say, the next step, and it's what you just go and you do it after a year or two. Where I'm at that age where this is the relationship I'm in now, where all my friends are getting married around me. All of our friends are getting married around us or just got married. And I got to say, well, we got to be together 10 years, and every step we took our time to think about it. So I'm probably the most sure I am now about marriage. But like I said, there were times even during the 2-year engagement, if things got rough, it would get to the point it's like, well, if we break this off, we already sent out the invitations, or people already gave us money at our engagement party, like stupid things like that you shouldn't keep it together.
Right.
But in the back of my head, I know
I actually was wondering, you know, going back, like mentioned a couple of times, like you didn't really become sure until like the last year, but you know, when you decided to ask her. And it's interesting, but even though you weren't sure, you guys managed to stay together for so long and work things out. And I think, you know, I'm thinking this is what most marriages need, are people who are willing to work things out. And yet you, even though you were unsure on if you wanted to make a commitment, you still had some commitment there, right?
Yeah, what I would say is this, like as we got closer to the marriage and it got to the point where to break up a relationship means like the dog we both love, like we'd have to split that up, or as it gets closer to the wedding, as it was getting closer, it got to the point it's like, all right, well, you know what, go through with the wedding, and if things don't work out, you could always get divorced, because I saw that as a possibility, seeing that my parents got divorced. Whereas, you know, at a young age, I was like, that's never a possibility. You're married, that's it, forever. And then seeing that could happen. With her parents didn't. And she was always like, listen, just don't even bother marrying me if that's ever even a possibility in your head. And I thought that was stupid, because I was like, all right, well, what if we do get married and everything's good? And then 15 years from now, we're both completely miserable. Do we just stay in it? But what I come to realize with this particular girl, with my fiance, is she stuck through everything else. And no matter what kind of fights we ever had, even if we got to the point where like, oh, we're going to break up, that never went more than a few days. And what I've come to realize over the last year is that we can fix it if we want. And a lot of times where there was even a doubt in my head, it's because of my unwillingness to compromise, which is what it always was. And whenever I did try a little, or any little things we picked up in therapy, if I actually worked at them, they work. And there are some times where we're so mad at each other. I'm like, I can't even look at her tomorrow. Like, who is this person? And then you walk away for an hour, and you come back and you readdress it. And as long as you're willing to bend a little bit, it's working with her. And like she's been every positive change that's happened in my life. It's happened with her, whether I decided to do it or she pushed me to do it. So yeah, that's how I feel now. I'm glad we took the time to really come to evolve. It took a lot of time, you know?
Yeah, it sounds to me, the key word I heard you say is willingness. You both are willing. You're both willing to put in the effort and to do the work to do it, which is, I think, huge. I mean, if you're not willing to do it, it's not going to work no matter what you do.
And anytime there was any doubt, it's because I wasn't willing, I realized. And also, like we play the bluff game. Like there were times that she's a flight attendant. Sometimes she's gone for a week. And if we get into a fight and then we don't talk, you know, go to the next day, we're not talking. And the last thing we said to each other for the billionth time is that we're going to break up. Like I sit in that moment the next day if we're actually not talking, and I feel it out, and I go, this is how it's going to feel with her gone. And there's a sadness there that's like, no, this isn't, I don't want this happening right now. So yeah, it's a lot of time, a lot of trial and error, a lot of not giving up. And yeah, it hasn't always been easy. But when I weigh the scales, I definitely don't deserve her. I definitely done way more damage to us over the course of the 10 years than she's ever done to me. She's incredibly loyal. Never have to worry about cheating. Like it's just never even been a thought in my head, which could be naive. I could not know, but honestly, like she's just always, it's just how she acts, her constant concern with me, sometimes overbearingness, but it's all out of, because of stuff I've done in the past. You know, I've never cheated, but as far as like, you know, just stupid choices I've made.
Right.
She has, you know what I mean? She just genuinely cares. I know she's going to be a good mother. And that's actually a priority in my life now, is I want somebody who will be. And our goals are kind of aligning. And then when comedy became a thing in my life, the fact that she hasn't been like, no, you can't do that. it means we can make it work. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a huge thing when somebody's supportive of your comedy. That I totally understand. One of the other questions I have is, you witnessed other people's marriages falling apart and how they behaved while you were in the army and whatnot, and then also your parents. Like, how did you feel when your parents went through it?
That's probably something I couldn't even give a complete answer on, but the most complete answer, like it's most recent times, I can give you a more complete answer. I was 11. It was right before Christmas, and the guidance counselor in school came. I was in 5th grade. Came into the classroom, asked me to go to her office, and I got there. My brother was there, so I was 11. He was 9, which meant my sister was 6, and they pretty much told. That's how we found out, which I thought was weird. The guidance counselor telling us instead of our parents. Like, we were in school. It's like, this is where we're finding out. And then when we got home, they talked about it more. Your father was going to be here through Christmas.
Wow, they went to the school and talked to the guidance counselor with you.
Yeah, I guess they were worried how they would address it, and that's how they did it. And
Wow.
I don't know, it didn't seem real. And plus, at that age, it's like, I don't know, we coped with it. My dad moved out. It was sad. I mean, from what I can remember, once my mom got her new boyfriend, who became her husband eventually, like, I really liked him. I just feel like there was this underlying sadness, but I didn't really deal with it at all for years. And it wasn't until I was later in high school where, like, it was rough for a while. Like, my dad would have us every other weekend. And if he wanted to see us more, my stepdad would be like, no, you can't. My mom would, like, agree with him. Or there were times where, like, something would come up between my mother and my father. And then we were like, oh, you see what a piece of garbage your father is? He's doing this. Or call him up and tell. Like, we were put in the middle a lot. It was very bitter for a long time. And what's weird is, like, eventually, my stepdad, he was an alcoholic. He died from that. My father had remarried when I was in 7th grade, so he was living in Pennsylvania. A lot of the closure came when I got older. I mean, I consider those times of my life very dark. It sucked. I hated my stepsisters. I hated living with my stepfather. It was just a shitty, shitty time. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, don't apologize. Do you feel that during those times that had a serious effect on, like, other choices you made in life, like drinking?
100%. I don't want to blame drinking on or my drug use on that specifically, because I'm an adult who makes my own choices. I take full responsibility. The thing is, I'm more inclined to have the disease of addiction because, well, genetically, right, my grandfather was an alcoholic.
It's a family disease. Yeah, it's a family disease.
Marcus, we're up there. But then my stepdad being around, he was always having a beer. You know what I mean? Like, my first, like, beers were sitting down with him and doing that. But it was mostly when I turned, he was very strict. He was a correction officer at Rikers Island. And he used to, like, treat home like a prison sometimes, like the way he was what he said went, and that was it. And sometimes if you bucked him or stood up to the powers that be, there were times when he was intoxicated where he would threaten physical violence, and, like, that would scare you back down. So, like, there was it was weird. I don't know. It was just very strict. And then when I turned the age where I could do what I want, I kind of felt like I went full steam into everything, because now I could stay out as long as I want. Now I'm going to try everything. And since I already had the genetic predisposition to become an addict or an alcoholic quicker, I feel like that took me. And maybe also not addressing some of that pain, because, when you're drinking or doing drugs, you're not coping or processing feelings. You're covering up. And what is that pain? I was extremely depressed throughout high school, and I couldn't figure out why. Depressed. I was in therapy. Oh, I'm so depressed. I don't know why. Everything sucks. Like, life is terrible. And I lived in a good home. My mother took care of me and stuff, but I was just always, like, screwed up in the head. And it's just now, the way it looks now is that, my mom and my stepmother get along. My mother's got a new boyfriend as a music teacher. He's a great guy. So my dad and his wife, they're living in New Jersey. I see my dad. That's the thing. Once I started working in construction, my dad was in construction. I started seeing my dad all the time. And all of a sudden, we had a relationship. So a lot of the bitterness my mother had towards my dad, when she says some of it, I would be like, he's really not that bad. He's fine. Like, and now it's at a point where all of us spend holidays together. Not this Thanksgiving. The one before was the first one where my mother, my father, my father's wife, my mother, all of us were together as a family having a Thanksgiving dinner, which hadn't happened in, like, 15 years.
Wow, that's fantastic.
So now I'm past it now, because everybody is getting along and they work together as a team.
Yeah.
Like, once in a while, my mother would be like, oh, your father owed me child support from I don't know, 10 years ago. So I'm like, could you let it go now? Like, I get he owed you, but you're successful and everybody's getting along. Like, what would you achieve by going after him for that? So, I have to talk off a ledge once in a while, but everybody relatively gets along as a unit, which is awesome. So now it's okay. And going through all that shit, my mother apologized later on in life. I did this to us anytime, because once they broke up, she raised us as a single mom. And when we got older and after her husband died, she was working as a teacher and then a bartender at night. And so she was never home. So that left us to our devices running around.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's not your fault. And I don't blame you anymore because I feel like me going through that is why I get to be a comedian today. I feel like if that stuff wasn't there, you know what I mean? Like we went through stages we were angry about what happened to us as kids and what we were robbed of. But people have it way worse and we're doing okay today and everybody's together. So. But it was painful for a long time, and I don't think I addressed it or came to any type of closure. Like, I don't know, my fiance said to me yesterday, she's like, I think you're finally starting to admit that divorce screwed you up a little. Like, like when we went to get pictures for our wedding for the slideshow, going through stuff when I was a kid with my family together. She was like, why aren't you looking at the pictures? And I'm like, I don't know why. Like, I'm not in pain right now, but there's just reluctance in me to go through this with you. I don't know why. It's just that.
You know what? I had a similar instance about going through pictures. Is I had all of my picture. I have most of my pictures in albums. Like, who does that anymore? Which tells you I've been around a while, but that I actually have printed. And you worked at CVS in the photo thing, so all right, you have them too.
That was something I said going through these albums.
Yeah.
I was like, thank God we have digital pictures now.
Right. So, but I had this box of like duplicate, triplicate pictures. Plus, I had these wedding albums sitting in there. And for years, as I moved, from Vegas to New York, and then New York now to California, I just had carried these boxes with me and several times in my moves during New York. And I was sat down one day and I was like, you know what? I finally have to go through them. And it took me a good month or so to go through it, but it was so cathartic. Like there were days where I could only look at a few of them, then I'd be like sad and cry a little bit, or happy and remember good times. Or it was so weird to go through and like dig into all those photos that I hadn't looked at in years.
You said, it's cathartic, but it was also more than a one-day process. You said you went through it a few times. See, me, I'm like, and this is something I still have to work on. It's like I would be like, oh man, I'd want to get it all done at once to get out of the way, so I didn't have to process that hurt or anything, which is not the way you're supposed to do it. You're supposed to go through it.
Yeah, that was my intention. I thought, I'll get it done in a day. No, it took a month. There were that many pictures, and I couldn't sit that long with all of that stuff. It was too much. It was too overwhelming. Yeah. So But so you did yours in a day, in an hour?
Well, yeah, because we just had to pick out 30 of us growing up separately up until now. But yeah, going through some, like they were having, my mother and my fiance were having the time of their life going through these pictures and look how cute. And me, it was just like, and honestly, I should revel in those pictures and just see like all the family members and what life looked like then. But I don't know. I feel like part of me getting past it was putting it away and not having to go back there. I don't know. Sometimes I can, like, because now that they're all okay and they could acknowledge, like at first when they were divorced and they were living their separate lives and weren't on good terms, it was like that my childhood up until 5th grade, their marriage was invalid. It wasn't really a thing. And now it could be addressed, and even the different spouses could acknowledge, this was my mother and father, this was their time together, and this is where these kids came from, and we're all a part of that now, and it's part of the history. It's been like put back in the history book, so it's good now, So, but I don't know. That was just a really weird time. I remember having allegiance too. This is weird. I remember being at my father's house on one of the weekends, and we were still living in the house that my mother had lived in together. And my father fighting on the phone with my mother and her husband, and he put me in the car. He said, "Get in the car. We're going home. We're going to the house," because he was having a problem with them, to go confront them at the house. And as we're pulling up to the house, the police were there in the driveway, and my father had a bat. I remember him pulling up to the house. See, this stuck with me a lot. This is another thing that made me reluctant towards marriage. Was my father? He worked hard. He worked really hard. He had. He worked as a union carpenter and then had his own business on the side. He worked he was throwing up blood at one point because he was working so many jobs.
Oh my gosh.
Just to have that life together be okay. And his idea was, well, when we turn in our 40s, and they're in their late 50s now. When we're in our 40s, we'll be set. Now we won't have to work like this. And my mother took the stance of, well, you're never around, and whatever her feelings were like. Maybe I remember the word neglect being thrown around, and so that's why they divorced. But anyway, so we pull up to the house that my father had worked for. And I remember him saying to the police stopped him at the driveway, and he looked out the window at the police officer and he said, "My house. This is my house. Like, I have a right to be here." And I remember thinking, like, wow, like, this is his house and he can't go in there. The police said so because my mother had left him and she's in there with her husband. But I still got out of the car and I ran inside to warn my stepfather that my father had a bat. Like, I took his side, and I always felt really guilty about that. Like, I went in, why did I go and help him when my father, was. It's just because I had lived with him every day, and I felt, I don't know, it's weird. But that was one of the things I was always worried about with marriage, is that how you could work really hard for something and somebody could take that away from you and make it theirs unfairly. So I was even like, maybe we should, even though I don't have any money like that, I'm like, oh, maybe we should sign a prenup. And my fiance's like, are you a fucking idiot? I'm not signing a prenup. Like, I make just the same money you do, and if we're together, then we split everything, and I don't know. That was just my my fear and my naivety, if that's even how you say it. But that was how I felt about it. But I'll tell you what, when I was in Alaska with the Army, I found out by state, that state was they don't just take your kids away and give them to the mother. Like, they look at everything very fairly. Or Jim Florentine, have you ever heard of him? He was VH1, that metal show. He's a comedian from New Jersey. Anyway, he was in a divorce recently. It was in the paper. And I heard him, like, last year when he got divorced, say on the radio, he's like, everybody says it's so slanted and skewed. He's like, it's not. It's fair. They go through your stuff. They split it in half. Like, it's fair. So, like,
it can be very fair. Like, both of mine, I think, were very fair. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, we didn't each get an attorney. We had one attorney. My first divorce cost $500. Basically, I sat down and made a list. Here's everything we had. I mean, we were 25. We didn't have anything. So here's what we had bought a house together. And I said, he can have the house. Like, we agreed. Like, we didn't have a lot of equity in anything. We didn't. And I think. And it wasn't, I mean, divorce isn't easy. It wasn't like we were best friends going in there and doing it. It was hard. And you still have all of those feelings of grief because you're grieving over this thing. But to that guy's point is like, yeah, it doesn't have to be hard, and it's not always hard.
Right. As long as everybody's not trying to hurt each other in the middle of the divorce. And that wasn't my experience with divorce. So that's why I had this irrational fear of it.
But I don't know if that's an irrational fear then, because your experience showed you this whole one side of it, and that's the side that and were raised with, so that makes sense. And I think probably a lot of people have kind of that point of view, I would think. I mean,
but
if that's all you know. But for it to keep me
away from marriage, this is where it gets crazy, and this is something I also had to learn from my fiance, was I'm looking at it from that scope. It's like, well, if I get married, here's this risk that we're going to not only get divorced, but you're going to take all my stuff. And she was like, do you approach marriage like with like that in mind? You know what I mean? It's like when we've had our fights and we've like, oh, we're breaking up. She's never been like trying to get at me. She was mostly like, if we're breaking up, I'm taking what's mine, you take what's yours, and I'm gonna go. So I kind of got to see like she's not this evil. You know what I mean? I mean, obviously, if people are really hurt, or she's made it very clear, if I ever cheated on her, she would do everything in her power to salt the earth. But
yeah,
that's the thing. It was like, okay, so if I'm looking at marriage, I also have to look at it. This is also in the wheelhouse: possible divorce and us destroying each other in the end. And that's not really a healthy way to look at it. Even though, yeah, it's a possibility. If you're marrying somebody that you just met 2 months ago, you should consider that. Or if you have a lot of money and you don't know them. But like I said, we're together.
And I think too, what I've learned too in my experience is those things can happen even when you're not married to somebody.
Right. Isn't there like, what is it, common law?
Well, no, not even that. I mean, you could meet someone for a few months, and this didn't happen to me, but you could meet someone and like a few months later, your bank account is cleaned out and you come home and your stuff is gone. Like, I'm sure it's happened to somebody out there, and I'm sorry for them, but that it did. But there are some bad people out there that would do stuff like that. So I don't think marriage protects you from that happening. And at the same time, just because I know when I entered both my marriages, I didn't go into either one of them suspecting at all that there is a possibility of divorce, or why would you enter a marriage? But and even after my first one, I was like, nope, this is it. When I got to the second marriage, I was like, nope, this is it. I'm good. Like, we're good. We're solid. But it's amazing how how things can change in any relationship quickly.
Yeah.
And I don't, and and to your point of a prenup, um, now you've realized like you're not going to do that, but I've thought of those too, and I think the worst part, like I think even if I didn't have a prenup and someone cleaned me out, I could recover financially, I can recover these other ways, but I think the emotional part is what's the worst, and that you
Yeah,
have no protection over.
you feel like somebody stole from you and the law is backing that up, like after how hard
Yeah.
do you mean the emotional part of the relationship?
The emotional part of relationship, like the, of feeling violated or feeling betrayed or
well, see, that's where I
those kind
feel
of
like,
things.
all right, so the emotional part, eventually you will get over it with time, but when you have to rebuild financially, I feel like, well, now that you're over it, now that you're still hurting that way, but
Yeah.
I guess you shouldn't also buy a house and go, okay, so this is my plan when this house burns down. Like that's not what you should do, I
Right.
guess. But
No.
how long? Well, the thing with the prenup too is I still think that prenups are good for people to have because if you don't ever get divorced, then they don't ever get called into question, and that's something that we fundamentally disagree on. But that's okay too because I'm not really playing, and the fact that we make similar money and we're starting our lives together, everything we both make will be equal at that point. So they really couldn't take millions of dollars away from me and unfairly give it to my wife in the event of a divorce because we're doing everything equally from the ground up. So that's why I'm totally okay with like, yeah, there's no need for a prenup,
Yeah.
But I used to bring it up. I don't know why I would bring it up, and it
Well,
was just
it makes sense. I mean, and some people, I'd be curious to hear more about people who's had good experience with prenups and bad experience with prenups. You're living in New York, and one thing I know
Yeah.
about New York is that they have one of the hardest states they have one of the lowest divorce rates in the country.
New York, really?
It does. And I think it's because in New York, it's very hard to get divorced because in order to get divorced, you have to file that you're legally separated and do a legal separation for 1 year. And then
Really?
you have to file, and I think it's pretty sticky. Like they have certain steps that you have to follow. Whereas when I was living in Vegas, it was very easy. I was divorced like within a month
Really?
of going to see it. Yeah, it was that quick. I was like, "Are you kidding me?" He's
You
like,
could also get married in 10 minutes, right?
yeah, because
In
he's like,
Vegas.
yeah, and I've done that. So, so I think it depends. You really need to take a look at the laws in the state in which you are married and where you're living. And that will make a difference because one state might be more protective of you as a couple than another. Like I think someone has to be at fault. Some states, someone has to be at fault, and then some are no fault. So, yeah, I think there are some laws like that where you have to go because people, when I knew them in New York and they were going through their divorce, it was such a hassle. And part of me in my mind, I was like, I wonder how mine would have turned out differently if I had had to wait that long because basically when I went, I used the same lawyer both times, which is really weird and creepy. I guess like who does that?
Back again.
But yeah, when he told me the second time, he goes, and next time you better have him come meet me first and let's talk about this.
Yeah.
But it was interesting because when I went and gave him all my paperwork, he said it will take me like a week to put everything together. He goes, but I go, how long does it take? He goes, once I file, it's like, I don't know, 10 days, 2 weeks at most.
Wow.
I was like, really? He goes, yeah, all I do is if you're not arguing over anything, I just submit the paperwork and the judge signs it and it's a done deal.
And I feel like in the event of a divorce, that's just how it should be. Like, take the
Yeah.
ugliness out of it. Like, just
Yeah.
you take yours. But like then again, there's businesses and money and property that gets all wrapped up in it. And I don't know. It'll make your head spin, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. I was just always scared because even though like I had been from a divorce and like always considered, oh, well, if we were miserable, we could get divorced. I never wanted to get married and have a divorce happen. I wanted to make sure I found somebody who I was completely sure about first. And like I said, up until very recently, am I like completely 100% sure that I could take this step, not only safely, but that we'll do very well together. We will succeed and flourish. Like, we'll build together. So
Yeah.
how long were you married?
Both of them were just about around 2 years, give or take.
How long did you know them before you got married?
About 2 years before so 4 years total probably of each. So yeah, and I got married back to back. I mean, my first husband was my like first real serious, super serious boyfriend, and my second husband was my second boyfriend after him, and that like yeah. So my family was like, why don't you just date people. Well, you don't have to marry everybody. You just, just take it easy, date, and figure it out. And that's
Would you get married again, or you're done?
no, you know what? I would never. This is something. When I went through my second divorce, it was hard because, you know, people are like, well, everyone makes mistakes. You start hearing that, and I'm thinking in my mind, but this wasn't a mistake. How can love be a mistake? I truly love this person,
Right.
and I don't want to look at marriage as a mistake. I guess it was meant to be, and it was meant to be over. And
Right. Wasn't a mistake. It
and
was just it was for that time. That's what it was supposed to be. Yeah.
and that's what it was. And as much as it hurt, and as much as I hated that happened, and that's what I was going through, um, it was what it was, and I couldn't change it. I could only learn from it. And I decided that after my second marriage, I was just writing about this too, is I was just had like this moment where like something switched on in me. And I had been crying and everything, and I thought to myself, I don't want to let this make me a bitter person. Like I can't let this define me for the rest of my life of like hate and cats and all this stuff. Like I have 9 cats and never date again, and I'm all this stuff, and put the blame on other people. I'm just going to own it, and I'm going to make this the best thing that happened. And so from that point, whenever people would ask me and they say, would you ever do it again? You know what? I feel like if I say no, then I'm shutting down an opportunity to actually have that relationship I've always dreamed of, to have that partnership. And I don't know, something out there. I don't want to give up hope, and I don't
Right.
want to give up faith that there is that possibility for me. And I think that makes me happy knowing I haven't shut myself out, because otherwise what's the point of dating people if I'm not going to have any chance of commitment, or I'm always going to be fearful, or I'm always, then any relationship's only going to go so far because I've put a limit on it. And I
Right.
don't,
But that was what I was wondering too. I struggled with this question was,
yeah.
is that only letting your relationship go so far? Because if you're with the person and you love them and it
Hmm.
never goes bad, then you could just be with them. And then what's
Yes.
marriage then besides a title or a
Correct.
legality? And
Yes.
then if you decide it doesn't work, now you got to go through this whole process. But what I've come to learn, or how I feel about it, was, I started to think why marriage came about, or now it's just a tradition. Is it archaic? Is it irrelevant now? All that kind of stuff. But when I started to think about it, I guess it does help tax wise and for your children's legitimate.
There's a business side to it, yeah.
There's a business side. And I started to think, is that really, is it valid then if it's just, but then going through, since we're Catholic, we had to go through pre-Cana.
Yeah.
And the way, like, and I'm not highly religious. We had to do it so we can get married in a church. But
Yep.
the way they described it was the married couple in this day and age, you're pretty much uniting yourself as one, and you're saying to the world, no, we're one and we're a team. And I really didn't look at it that way before. It's like, yeah, you know what? I'm not going about this alone. Like all of it, it's more of a symbol to each other than anything
Yes.
else. That we're going to say we're more than just dating. And it kind of gave me a new respect for it in a way, even if I don't know how cheesy that sounds, but I was like, no, there is something to it. It's me pledging myself in front of
See,
everybody to this person.
exactly. That's
And I want to
exactly
do
it.
that now. Yeah.
And when other people have asked me, like, if you were to get married again, like, what kind of wedding would you have and stuff? And in my mind, I'm like, I view marriage now is what you just described it. It's a union. It's saying we're a team. We're committed to each other. It's those things. And I think looking back, like when I was young, and my younger self may argue with me on this, but when I was young, when we were getting married, we were planning a wedding. So my focus was on a dress, and it was on planning this and who should be invited and what kind of DJ should we have. And,
Going through that now.
I get focused on those kind of things. And I can't speak for everyone, but I see it happen in a lot of other women and people planning their wedding. And now I look back and I'm like, wow, I wish I would have relished more in the moment. I wish I would have really stepped back from the planning of a wedding and focused on the meaning of it and what we were doing. and taking extra time for the two of us to build our relationship,
Right.
rather than plan a wedding. Like the effort, if I had spent the time and money, here's a thought, if I had spent all that time and money that I had put into planning a 1-day event for my friends to drink free alcohol and dance, what if I had put that time and effort, in my next if I get married again, take that and spend it with each other and focusing on each other and our goals and our dreams and our hopes for our partnership, rather than a 1-day event, and kind of change how I celebrate that day. I would want to celebrate my day differently, I guess, is what it comes down to, because to me, it has so much more meaning than what it did when I was 23 when I first got, or 22 when I first got married. And celebrate and relish in that and focus on those things instead of, and really the journey as a partner with somebody, rather than, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, and I'm spending money, and I'm doing this, and I'm buying a dress, and
And I'm starting to realize that more recently with because the way I took it was this, like, okay, I want to get married to you. We're both doing it together, but a lot of the preparation she's doing, like the majority of it. She's like she like knows everything that has to get done. And part of me, because of like how stressful it could be organizing a wedding, I was just like, okay, it's just gonna be one day. Let's just do it, and whatever. Like, I'm happy to be with you before and after that, and that's just that one day, so everybody can have their day to see us get married. But yeah, lately, I think it was after, I don't know, just going through some of the stuff with, say, the priest.
Yeah.
Which once again, I'm not highly religiously motivated, but just talking to him about that day or going through some of the stuff together, I started to realize, no, like that's our day, and now I'm actually excited more than just wanting to get past that day because of all the stress planning it brings. Like I'm like, I'm going to enjoy this. Like that's, the day where we did this for each other. And that's when all the other stress with all the people, who's coming in, who wants to sit where, when that stuff comes up, like she'll get a little stressed out because she's handling a lot of the organization. But I'm like, who cares what they want? Because they're all going to be, annoying on that day. But at the end of it, like that's our day. So I'm not really so worried about those people. So I started to look at it that way recently. What I've come to realize is any fears I had or any notion I had of marriage, none of them are true, because people are living in these marriages in all different ways. And what I've come to realize is what I'm building now with my fiance, like that's the real truth. There's no mold to put it in. Like there's certain things you do to get married. Yes. And I found a little bit of comfort in that, because it's like it's not only doomed to end or it has to go this way. Like as long as we're supporting each other and helping each other out, like, and we love each other. That's the other thing, is like we're really enjoying each other lately, and it really took us all this time to get to that point, to learn all these life lessons. And I don't know how I would have done it any other way in my experience. Like it really took all this growing up together and her unwavering faith in me, because all the crap I put it through, like she should have left a long time ago. So that's another thing. I can't spit in the universe's, like I have no gratitude. Like even the times when I question things, I had to sit down and go like, she should have left you a long time ago. Like there's a reason like you're this lucky. So, and then when I do a little soul searching and a little work on myself, we decided to keep going at it. And there's times where I'm completely wrong and I think I'm right, and vice versa. And it's just now it's at the point when you get to that where it's like an unstoppable force, meaning an immovable object. You go, okay, but is it worth throwing all this away? And it's like, no, it's definitely not, because we have the good outweighs the bad. You know what I mean?
Right. I mean, no relationship is going to be perfect, but it sounds like you have gone through so much that you actually figured it all out before you went through the whole process of a marriage and divorce. Like,
right. And like there were times even a few months ago where I didn't have anything figured out, and I still don't have it all figured out. But as we get closer, I'm way more comfortable, excited, sure of it. And I realize there is no guarantees, but like we went from being stupid little kids working at CVS, having nothing, to getting our first apartment, that not working out, to me leaving for the Army, going through addiction, recovery, her being there and dragging me through all that, to us moving back into a small 1-bedroom apartment, no car, to now we have a car, we're in a 2-bedroom. Like life is progressing as long as we work at it. And it takes time. Like there's times I'm just out of my head, depressed, even though nothing. And then there's times she's like that. And one of us is always there to help the other and go, okay, well, we have each other. There's really nothing wrong. We have food. We have a couple dollars in the bank. Like we have, if you go back 5 years, we have progressed and we have gotten things because we worked for it. So yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I can't even put into words. Like, you know what I mean?
Well,
Like, oh,
yeah,
yeah.
because it's always changing. But I mean, you've come so far, and I'm just listening to all the things you guys have gone through together, and that's amazing. I mean, and now your whole feelings on your relationship have changed, right? So, because you guys met 11 years ago, and
Yeah.
you lost your job, and then you progressed and pursued and broke up and got back together, and now you're together, and you've decided to make this commitment, and suddenly you're figuring out like, wow, this is actually going to be our day. You know, I mean, you're getting the whole gist of what the marriage is about, which is huge because I think it took me a long time to go back and figure those things out and evaluate after the fact. And so my question to you is like, how do you see yourself moving forward?
Hmm. Well, we're gonna get married in May. I see that happening. Well, as far as us or just in life in general, I mean, because I also had to learn like my life in general means that she's there. Like if I want to continue pursuing comedy and hopefully that goes somewhere, whether it does or doesn't, she's along for the ride. We're gonna get married. We want to have a family, so we're gonna try to have kids. I don't know. We just honestly, when we start thinking of it all, it gets very overwhelming. But when we take it day by day and do what we have to do, it seems to work out. So yeah, we're gonna get married in May. We're gonna just keep working to do better because I don't know if you would have asked me 5 years ago, I wouldn't have been in comedy number one.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be living where we are today. It's just we took it one day at a time. We had just a little inkling of which direction we wanted to go to, and then it kind of developed from there.
Yeah.
You know, so I don't know. I think we're going to be okay. I think we're going to be okay. We're going to have kids. I think that's going to happen, God willing, and we're going to be really happy because despite everything else, despite what kind of car I want to drive in the future, despite that I want a good comedy career, whether that happens or not, I know that I want to be with her. And as much as sometimes we beat each other up, I know she wants to be with me. I know we both want kids. I know we have 2 dogs that we're absolutely in love with. And like we have similar jokes about them. We do the same voices, like when we pretend to be them and like act out little skit, like the little things like that are very similar and gel and work.
Yep.
And sometimes with such complete opposites, but that pushes the other one in a way that they need to go sometimes, which really helps. You know, so I don't know. At first I was like, why bother getting married when it could end in divorce? And now I don't see it that way. I see it as why not get married because we make it work some days. Like we make it work every day somehow. You know, and as long as somebody doesn't give up on that, we'll be okay, you know?
So is that what kind of advice would you give someone else who's a child of divorce and they're rethinking it?
What happened to you or what happened really between your parents has nothing to do. I mean, it doesn't dictate your future. You don't have to repeat what happened to them. Like you're not destined to be in like walk their footsteps, you know what I mean? And as you get older, you start to see that your parents are adults just like you, like they're not like the authority figure like they used to be. You can actually talk to them, like, I don't know, learn from their lessons. Like you could think about it as a rational adult and go, okay, what could they have done different? Where did they go wrong? And make sure you also don't do that. And the hardest thing, honestly, is when you get in your relationship, like I said, it could be whatever you want it to be. Just communication, and that's the hardest because I need to be told this constantly because I never want to talk about things. But you learn the most and you make the most improvements with your partner when you communicate. And this is another thing where sometimes I'll be held to the fire. It's like, okay, so what do you want to do now? And I don't want to give an answer. You got to come up with some type of plan together because the other thing is if you don't, you'll have a plan, they'll have a plan, and then heads will butt as you start walking down 2 different roads. And you got to just you got to know. And this is something that I didn't for a while. Like you have to really be willing. You have to realize it's not just you and them as separate individuals who are living under the same roof. If you're going to get married, you know, if you can't feel this way, then don't get married. But like I didn't want to lose her. So I had to realize it's us together. It's not just about me. Every decision, everything, because it's both of you living in both your houses, paying your bills, working towards a common goal. And if you have no interest in sharing a goal, then don't do it, and that's okay too. But since I made this commitment, it didn't get easier until I admitted to myself, okay, well, we're in this together, and I got to make just as many sacrifices because this is another thing, probably starting comedy after being together 8 or 9 years. Like now all of a sudden, oh, I'm going this way with my life. That couldn't be easy. And there was like a lot of questions and uncertainties and even arguments over it. But she sacrifices her time. She comes to all my shows. If it's a show where I have to have somebody at, she's always there. She's seen my act and all my friends' acts so many times. And you begin to realize that they sacrifice so much just to be with you, like in their free time. If she's on the road for a week as a flight attendant and she comes home and she's got to come to one of my shows and she just wants to sit in her ass that day she's off. And then I had to go, okay, she's doing that for me. Like take 10 minutes or take 3 hours and go see, you know, the movie she wants to see. Or if she wants to go do this today and take care of something, go with her. Or if she wants to go to the mall and sit in the makeup chair at, what is it, MAC, whatever it's called. So she needs to buy makeup, go stand there, even though you're as bored out of your mind and you'll probably complain through the whole thing. Like it is a give and take. And honestly, I probably could give a little more. Like I know right now she's listening and I said the movie thing and I have not taken her to any of the movies she wants to see recently. But like, you know, in other areas, like, you know, I'm getting there.
Yeah. No, it does. It takes a lot of work. And I do have one other question for you.
Yeah.
What was the number one thing that you feel has really helped you overcome your obstacles with getting into a marriage and overcome the fear of it all?
I would say that I'm usually the biggest obstacle. Time and patience on both of our parts. Sometimes I need time to just think it over or see things progress and just happen naturally. And then I go, oh, you know, honestly, it's just experience, just time. Because there's been plenty of times where I was like, there's no way that's going to go good, or I don't know what I want. I don't know. It took time. Like I said, communication, going to couples therapy very briefly, like even these little tidbits of things, and you start to put them together over the years and they kind of make a bigger picture. And honestly, it's just because we still want it at this point. That's all it really is. If you don't want it, you don't have to keep going for it. You don't have to get married. But I realized, considering all my options, like we've also been together, had periods not together over the years, and this is way better than being alone. And for what I'm trying to achieve in life, like I'm better off because of her. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I also, you gotta, anytime you're having any type of doubt or obstacle and you don't know, there's like no apparent answer, you have to literally stop what you're doing. And you need to just look at, like my mother was complaining about her day yesterday, and she was saying how bad everything that went bad in her day was, and that she thought somebody put a hex on her. And her boyfriend was like, yeah, but you also left out that you got a commendation at work today for doing a good job. He named like 3 other good things. So literally, it's how you're looking at it. She looked at all the bad, so everything was bad. You just, whatever you're doing, you stop what you're doing. And I got to tell myself this all the time because I still need to learn it. You stop and you look at what all the good was, what you have to literally be grateful for. And if you need to make a decision of should I be in a relationship or not with this person, you add up all that good and is it worth it? And honestly, at the end of the day, it's undoubtedly yes. Even at my most mad or unhappy for whatever reason, that's really what it is. You got to stop and just think. And don't act on anger. In the moment, you always will make the wrong choices.
Yes, it's so true. I always have to step back and go, what are my old habits? What's my new habit? Like, because I don't want to react to something. That's a huge deal. So
anger is bad. You'll just go for the stabbing motion, and then everybody's got to heal after the stabbing. But if you walk away for a few minutes and cool down and readdress. So yeah, I don't know. A lot of times I don't have the answers, but everything turns out okay. Like, you know what I mean?
It does. And to the point you made about your mom in that last example, it's when things were bad for me, someone turned around and said, "Why don't you write down 5 things you're grateful for every day?" And you know, some days it just might be the fact that you woke up and you're alive or you have food on the table and stuff.
Yeah.
But then I was challenged, why don't you come up with some better ones than that? And as I started doing my gratitude list in the morning, it changed. Like suddenly really good things started happening. And I don't know if they had always been happening, but now that I was paying attention and looking for something to put on my list, I really took note. It was kind of crazy how it was almost like, oh, wow.
It's crazy how you said that it changed as you practice this more and more. I don't practice it enough, but if you look at like Tony Robbins, one of the things he always says to do, like before you get on stage, and it helps sometimes, is you tell yourself, I'm unstoppable. I'm unstoppable. You say it over and over. Eventually you start to believe it. Or
Yeah.
one of the recovery methods was every day get up, whether you feel like it or not, and just go, I love my life. And eventually you just saying and speaking it out there, it makes it happen. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
It's fake
So-
it till you make it.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
And like, that's a great idea to write down what you're grateful for. I should
Yeah.
try that too.
Yeah.
Because you start to see, okay, when you actually think about it, you do have plenty. Like we're alive right now. We're living in America. We're on opposite sides of the country talking through a screen. You have a pod, like whatever we went through, like I get to go on stage and entertain people. You get to go on stage, entertain people. You have a podcast, like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. It's
life's pretty good. We're not
like-
hungry.
right.
You know?
Life is good. And yeah, there's some obstacles and challenges. That's life, but we're better off than a lot of people in the world. So for that, I'm grateful. Thanks for
Yeah.
being so open and honest and like, I mean, just telling and sharing so much, because I know from my experience it's always helpful to hear what other people are going through instead of, oh, it's just going to be okay.
I really think it's awesome that you're doing this. It was another way for me to, like, you know, sit down and any kind of broadcasting, like I don't know, like I do a show where we do a lot of joking around just to go in another direction, just have a nice conversation, and just the specific area of it, like you were saying, you don't want to just always hear, oh, it's going to be okay. Well, sometimes it's not going to be okay, and this is how you get through it: is you talk about it, you hear about other people's experiences, and I don't know. I want to just say thank you for letting me do this, because it was great for me to talk about it. I got to talk about stuff I haven't talked about in a really long time. So
Oh, you're very welcome.
thank you again, Leanne. I
You're
really appreciate
welcome. Have a good night.
it. You too.
All right. Bye.
Bye.